All right, and we're off. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show presented by Superdraft. Dave Loughran with me, Sal Vetri. 6 games to hit on today, Sal, and a bunch of them have totals currently sitting below 220. A bunch of slower-paced games between slower-paced, pretty solid defensive teams, and then a couple interesting ones where you would expect to see a lot of scoring, but one or two of those teams playing on their second of a back-to-back. So a lot to break down. Only 6 games, but I like this slate. I think there are a lot of nuances here that we can get into this morning.
Yeah, I agree. A smaller Wednesday slate than we usually have to break down, so we can definitely get into detail on it. But yeah, I was pretty surprised to see some of these totals, probably indicators that we have a couple of big stars in question today, probably some indicators that they might not go.
Happy to have everyone with us, as always, on this Wednesday morning. Superdraft.io is the sponsor of the strategy show. If you haven't heard of them, you haven't played there yet, now is your chance to do it. I would definitely recommend taking advantage of that opportunity because you'll get $20 in free super cash when you sign up through us using the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, and depositing $100 or more. That'll get you $20 in super cash right away to be used on the site to play and win real money. Can't beat it. There's no salaries at Superdraft. It's all multiplier mode. So what's that mean? Happy to tell you. If you take a look at tonight's slate, or if you wanted to use anybody from James Harden to Russell Westbrook. Let's take a look at tonight's where $6,000 up top to first place. It's the $30,000 jump shot, $12 to enter. Trae Young has a 1x multiplier. What that means is whatever he scores is exactly what he gets. He scores 60, he gets 60 fantasy points. However, that changes once you get to these players that would be less expensive on, say, DraftKings or FanDuel. For example, Donovan Mitchell, 1.5x. So he gets 1.5 times whatever he scores tonight. Not bad. And that's really how that's essentially how you are playing on Superdraft. There are 5 games tonight, not 6, because they're tipping off at 7:30, meaning if you've got your DraftKings lineup and FanDuel lineups to submit, and that's going to take you up until lock, fortunately, you're going to have an additional 30 minutes to get everything you need in on Superdraft. So there's no Sixers Detroit Pistons game, but you've got every other game, all 5, and now you can sweat that as well at the 7:30 tip. So check it out. Guys like Jokic, 1.1 times, 1.1x. Kristaps Porzingis, 1.2. So instead of looking for value from a salary standpoint, you're strictly looking from a multiplier perspective. It's a wonderful thing. Everyone we know that's headed over there and checked it out has really enjoyed it. And we've had a couple people win pretty big over there on Superdraft so far. So go to superdraft.io or download it in the App Store. Use that promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO. When you sign up and deposit $100 or more, you'll get $20 in free super cash right out of the gate. They're the sponsor of the NBA Strategy Show. You ready to kick this off?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we start with the only 7 p.m. game. And there's a lot to get into here between the Sixers and the Pistons. So the Sixers are 11.5-point favorites, which means, we should expect Joel Embiid to play. He did practice. I have no reasons to believe that he's not going to be active. 217 total in this one. So we know this much. Embiid without Simmons this year has been stellar. 37% usage, 23% rebounding, and 23% assists. 1.6 DraftKings points per minute. Ben Simmons, he might not even return until the playoffs. So the question here is, when you're looking at Joel Embiid, we had been getting him at a pretty stark discount at times, but that changes today. He's $10,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's $9,000. I mean, it's just getting out of control, Sal. $9,000 on FanDuel. So the answer to that question is pretty easy. I prefer him over Jokic and over Gobert and over anyone else at the position. But on DraftKings, it's a little different. So I want to set you up with this. Since the trade deadline, since losing Andre Drummond, the Pistons are 19th in defense, dead last in pace, dead last in offensive rating. But they're allowing the 6th most points in the paint, the 4th most points per possession in post-ups, it is a very good spot for Joel Embiid. The only downside is the pace of play and the fact that this game could get wildly out of control. But are you paying 10-5 for him on DraftKings? On FanDuel, I don't think I need to ask you that question.
Yeah, FanDuel seems like a no-brainer if he plays. And yeah, like you said, he practiced. The only thing I would say is they don't play again until Saturday. So if they wanted to hold him out again, it'll just ensure 3 more days of rest. To start the morning, I have it projected both ways with him out or in. The good thing is it's the first game, so we'll definitely get that news. And unlike last year, the Sixers have been really good this year, just getting us that news pretty earlier in the day. So yeah, I'm still interested in him on DraftKings. It's a shoulder injury, so if he is active, I'm going to project him for full run around 30 to 32 minutes. He's around a 1.6 guy with no Simmons on the court. And the other thing is just the matchup. So the pace of play is going to drag it down the total, but there's no John Henson. He's out for Detroit for another week. It's going to be a backcourt of Thon McCurr and Christian Wood. So it's a fantastic spot for him. He'll be able to
They brought Donta Hall up from the G League too.
Okay, so that's good to know. Yeah, so either way, it'll be a great spot for him. He'll be able to post up much more here, especially since Simmons isn't on the court and playing, just not having 2 cloggers out there. So it sets up really well. At 10,500, I'll be interested still in DraftKings if he starts. And if he does start, I'll be projecting him for full run.
Yeah, we had seen Joel Embiid before this shoulder injury playing much more considerable minutes, right? 36 against Atlanta, and that's a game that they won by 17. Sure, it was closer. It was close pretty much up until the final several minutes. 41 minutes in that overtime game against Brooklyn. Brett Brown has not been afraid to give him significantly more run than usual, specifically with the Sixers needing wins here down the stretch. I'd probably lock him. I'd probably give him 32 here, but the line 11.5 to me suggests that he will play. I don't think Josh Richardson being active does enough to really make any significant movement there. Harris is a good player, sure, but I mean, you're looking at a squad that just dropped the road game to the Golden State Warriors, who are without Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, running out a starting lineup with 3 guys that weren't in the league when the season began. So I think 11.5 suggests that he's going to play. It's just a matter of how much. Giving him 31, 32 in this specific spot sounds about right. What about the rest of the Philadelphia 76ers, though? Because a number of these guys are priced to mirror or to reflect Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and presumably even Josh Richardson being out. Tobias Harris being one of them at 8,500. Shake Milton, 6,200. Getting Joel Embiid back throws a wrench into the works for sure.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, if Embiid's going to end up playing, I'll have no interest in Harris, no interest in Horford. Horford would see both of these guys would go from being like 1.15 to 1.2 fantasy point per minute producers with no Embiid, Simmons, and even Richardson on the court to now being like around a little over a 1 fantasy point per minute producer. Horford would see a pretty decent minutes cut. Instead of playing mid-30s, I'd probably put him around somewhere 28 or so. So I'd have no interest in them. Richardson would be the one that I would have interest in. He's coming off of a concussion. So, I mean, unless he gets re-injured with another concussion, takes a hit to the head, he's going to miss the whole game anyways. But otherwise, I'll project him for his normal run-in with no Simmons. I'll give him around 34 minutes today. He'll look really strong at 5,200. Nice matchup against Detroit where their backcourt, their entire team, but their backcourt today, once again, is going to be with some question marks and some players out. Bruce Brown, questionable.
Do you have anything else for the Sixers?
No, it's so right now, if Embiid does play, it'll be Richardson 1, Embiid 2 for me, and then really no other interest. If Embiid was to miss again, then Harris, Horford, Richardson, and I would have interest once again in Mike Scott.
Yeah, if Embiid misses, everything is different, especially against a really bad Pistons team. I don't see it, but yeah, you're right. It's at least worth breaking it down in the event that he does miss. He did practice. I know he hasn't been completely cleared to play. If Embiid doesn't play, you're going to see probably more Mike Scott, who has been, from a fantasy perspective, fine. Real life, he's been brutal, but just such a terrible defensive player. He's $4,800 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Mike Scott's coming in at $4,300. Do you have interest at that price point if Embiid misses?
Yeah, I think that I do. So if I could give him 28 to right around 30 minutes if Embiid was to miss again, and just assuming that he gets to start in this matchup, I'll have some interest at 4,800. We do have other value on the slate, so it wouldn't be a priority interest, but his point per minute production bumps up to around 0.8 or so. So yeah, I'd end up still getting to some, probably more so on DraftKings with the dual eligibility.
So since the trade deadline, you've got Christian Wood leading the team with 1.21 fantasy points per minute. That's before you even take Derrick Rose off the floor. 26.5% usage, or almost 27% usage, 18% rebounding. Take Rose and Jackson off. His per minute production stays pretty much the same, but his usage skyrockets to nearly 30%. It's been a really productive 1 or 2 months from Christian Wood. With John Henson being out, there's less bodies to occupy that front court unless Dante Hall actually comes in and plays significant minutes. He was playing 13 minutes a game for a stretch of 3 games there leading into March. But I would imagine it doesn't affect Christian Wood too much outside of the fact that he's already playing huge minutes. He's $8,100 on DraftKings. So his price has climbed, and justifiably so. $7,900 on FanDuel at power forward. This is a situation to me where Embiid being in or out not only affects him from the standpoint of, well, the matchup becomes way better in the paint and around the basket, but also the fact that maybe it doesn't develop into a blowout nearly as quick. Not saying it will, but if Embiid's on the floor, it just changes everything. So I have him in, which means that it takes some shine away from Christian Wood, but he's been good enough to the point where we definitely have to talk about him regardless.
Yeah, I have to talk about him regardless. Like I have him in today with Embiid in. I'll have him as like around a 1.25 fantasy point per minute producer. When you take Rose off, he can spike depending on the sample used to like 1.3, 1.35. He's been really good, but now you're getting, especially if Embiid's on, just the toughest matchup that he could probably be in suit for. But no John Henson, he should see potentially more center minutes, but definitely just a stable 35 plus minutes. I put him at 35 today. At 8,100, he just looks okay. He's not, if Embiid does play, he's not somebody that I will prioritize. I'll get to some of, but at this price point, it starts to make it a little bit restrictive. The guy who does seem interesting, and it'll depend on what Dante Hall's run is. I gave him 10 minutes, but if I give Thon McCurr just 24 minutes at 3,100, he starts to become appealing. Same issues, though, that it's a tough matchup. He's not that productive of a player, but no John Henson, so it should secure around mid-20s in minutes for him. Keep a close eye on the starting lineup here. If you had Christian Wood starting at the 5, then it could be a situation where I would not want to get to Thon McCurr because then he's just probably playing backup minutes. Maybe Sekou Doumbouya gets more run at the 4 and Wood takes on a lot of 5 minutes. But if you do have a starting lineup that has Thon McCurr starting at the 5, I feel pretty good about mid-20s in minutes. He's only 3,100, so it just comes out to being a high teens fantasy producer, but it provides some good value.
You have anything else from the Pistons?
Bruce Brown's questionable. He played 37 minutes in a game back off of an injury, a lower body injury. I think it was an ankle. Pulling it up now. But if he does play, I gave him 33 minutes here. It's an ankle injury, so just seeing that he played 37 minutes off of it last time, I think he'll be okay to go. And you're going to get Brandon Knight back for this one. Gave him 28 minutes, doesn't really do much. So right now, my interest would be probably Bruce Brown, Thon McCurr, and Christian Wood from this team.
Okay, so we'll move it on to the next one here. The Miami Heat at home hosting the Charlotte Hornets. Very interesting game. So I know I've been talking about this a lot on the streams, but I'll mention it again, Sal. The Hornets have covered or pushed in 7 straight games. And the only game that they didn't cover was last one against Atlanta. I took the points too. The +4. They end up losing by 5 in double overtime, which, by the way, if you guys watch that game, you know, bad teams can play great games because that was one of the most exciting, enjoyable games I've seen in a long time. It was insane, and a questionable decision by the refs towards the end of the game was awful. So the Hornets were up by 1 with like 5 seconds left in regulation, right? I said to Ben, I was like, the only thing I don't need here is for them to foul Atlanta and them to make one of 2 free throws, right? You can make both. You can make none. You can make the shot or miss the shot. Just don't get fouled and make one of 2. Trae Young makes one of 2. They go to overtime, go to double overtime, end up losing by 5. You knew at that point it just wasn't meant to be. But they've beat Toronto. They've beat Houston. They beat, the Knicks. The reason I say this is of their last 7, they've won 3 of them outright as dogs in all of them, maybe not against the Knicks. They lost to the Nuggets by only 2 points. They stayed very competitive against the Bucks with Giannis and a healthy Bucks team on the floor. They're oddly playing really well, and one of the reasons for that is Terry Rozier has a 25% usage rate since the start of March. He's averaging a fantasy point per minute. And someone said on Twitter the other day when I said this is the best game I've seen from him, they're like, oh, it only took him 26 shots in 44 minutes. Well, Sal, he shot 62% from three-point range on 13 attempts. He shot 6 of 9 from 3 the game before that, 5 of 9 the game before that. He's cruising right now. And while the fantasy production hasn't been otherworldly, he's helping to keep this team competitive with his shooting from long range, and Devontae Graham has played better as well. I'm not saying I like the Hornets today against Miami. It's an ugly spot. The Heat have been another team that plays really well at home and struggles on the road. But it's definitely interesting to note that this Hornets team has looked like they have an entirely different identity over the past several weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, it factors in just getting healthier. Some other guys like Monk being out, securing some more minutes. But yeah, Rozier is just playing a lot better since the start of the month. For the season, like around a 0.9 fantasy point per minute producer. But like you said, now he's getting a fantasy point per minute since the start of March on the number. But not only that, his minutes have been very stable. We were used to getting 32 minutes as a sort of a higher game 33, but lately 35 is like his low point since the start of March. Devontae Graham got back up to that 36 number in the last game. I have them both projected for 35 minutes today. It's a tougher matchup against Miami. Miami's backcourt is all banged up. Butler, Nunn, and Hero all questionable today. So that'll depend on how much interest I have in these guys for the defensive matchups. I have Rozier and Graham both in right now for me as just in a player pool, secondary options. Both their price points came up, so that hurts as well. Tougher matchup, but the minutes will always keep them in play for just GPP upside. The way that I'm projecting Miami, and it'll affect just the defense, is I have Butler out. He didn't practice with a toe injury yesterday. The sentiment didn't seem great. I put Kendrick Nunn in. They said that he's just battling a cold. And then Tyler Hero practiced yesterday, and they said that he was pretty close to a full go. So I projected him in for like around 25, 26 minutes. So when we get to the Miami side, it makes them look a little bit more appealing. But with Butler out, it also makes just this defensive matchup a little bit better for these guys. So Graham and Rozier stand out as like secondary options. Zeller and Washington make a player pool for me right now. Washington got in just major foul trouble early on in that last game, only ended up playing like high teens in minutes and just didn't even see the court in the overtime. So I gave him back up to 30 minutes. Tougher matchup, though, for them against just Miami's front court.
Hey, by the way, an article just dropped in the International Business Times, ibttimes.com. It dropped at 9:43, so 5 minutes ago, saying that Embiid is unlikely to play because they're going to preserve him for the postseason.
For the rest of the season?
Well, I don't know. That's what's strange here. It says Embiid's unlikely to play against the Pistons. Sixers are preserving the All-Star center for the playoffs. So it seems unlikely. This is what I gather from it. And mind you, I'm just reading it right now. I couldn't, really focus in on it. But yeah. To me, it seems like against bad teams, they might be sitting him at home, and then against good teams playing him. I don't know, but this suggests that we won't be seeing Joel Embiid again today.
Yeah, so pretty much what I did there, I'm just allocating. I have another projection ran for that. So if that's actually the case, then I'll have the most interest in Richardson still. Horford, then Harris, then Mike Scott would be the guys that make a player pool from that team, and it would make Christian Wood and Don McCurd look a little bit more appealing.
Okay. Anything else for the Hornets?
No, they all look like their price points all came up. They all look like secondary options, but guys that in GPPs, if you're entering a good amount of lineups, you want to get to because all these guys and really Graham and Rozier specifically have that GPP ceiling that you're looking for.
Talk about the Miami Heat here. You've got Tyler Hero practicing again. That's good news. Not necessarily sure what his status is going to be. He's been out for a while, but he is questionable. Jimmy Butler's also questionable with that ailing toe. Kendrick Nunn is questionable with an illness, and then Myers Leonard remains out. So Butler, Tyler Hero, and Kendrick Nunn are all questionable to play. This could mean a few things. Number one, Goran Dragic could become a very, very appealing option today. His minutes have been somewhat curtailed lately in close games. I know he had 5 fouls last time out, but if those guys sit, you have to think that Dragic, or if even two of them sit, Dragic gets a ton of minutes. It's just so early to really have any feel one way or the other.
Yeah, and the Heat. So this game starts at 7:30. Hopefully, we get that news a little bit before 7 lock. The Heat are usually another team like the Sixers that are good at getting that news out. So hopefully that we do get it. I currently have Butler projected out. I have Hero in on 26 minutes. I have none in on 30. And again, that's just the way that I'm going to do it right now. That's probably the way I'll leave it if we don't get any news, hoping to get it. But just from the practice reports, reading some of the stuff from the coach yesterday, Spoelstra, it seemed like it was negative sentiment around Butler. None seemed to just be battling a cold, and Hero, they said, looked really good in practice. So I'm just basing it off of that. If we get some news, great. But with it being that Bam is a 1.24 fantasy point per minute producer, give him 35 minutes. That's with Butler off the court this year. He's priced up to 9,000 in a really strong matchup. So I'm going to have interest. We've seen him hit 60-point upsides twice this year when Butler's off the court. He grades out as a pretty average play at that price point, but if you get the ceiling, it looks good. So I'll have some. And then all these guys, Miami's the team that probably looks the best for me because Butler being out. It makes Goran Dragic, if I give him 30 to 32, he looks really strong at 5,500, averages over a fantasy point per minute when Butler's off the court. If none plays and if I give him 30 with Butler off, he'll start to look good at 4,800. Crowder, Derek Jones Jr., I gave them each 28 to 30 minutes as well. So all these guys look really strong in a player pool for me. If Tyler Hero was to play like 25 minutes, he's only 3,300 tonight. He'll look pretty good. So Miami's the team that I expect to get the most of as of right now. If Butler plays, I'll have a lot of interest in him, and I'll still get a good amount of Miami. It'll just take some away from Nunn and Dragic and Hero.
So we know Butler didn't play or practice on Tuesday. He did say he's feeling better. Are you projecting him out? It sounds like you're projecting him out.
Yeah, as of right now, I'm projecting him out, really hoping for some sort of news. I guess what I'm going off of there is just the mispractice, and then Spoelstra's comments were just that he was more so limited than like a full participant.
So it was kind of strange that last game, the Miami Heat were actually losing that in the fourth quarter. So while they won by 11, it was the furthest thing from a blowout. They went on a late run. But Sal, that they were down by 8 points about 3 or 4 minutes into the fourth quarter. The reason I bring that up is because Jimmy Butler did not return. He went down about 7.5 minutes into the third quarter. Do you know who played the remainder of the game after that?
For Butler?
Solomon Hill.
Yeah, I saw that he got up to 30 minutes in that game. And they also didn't have Crowder in that one too.
Yeah, they didn't have Crowder. He's going to play. But point being here that Goran Dragic never actually returned. So he did catch a fifth foul to start the fourth quarter, but he never came back. I can't imagine that would be the case today. But now that they've got some reinforcements at the wing positions, it definitely makes you think that Dragic would benefit more from a lot more from guys like Kendrick Nunn and Hero being out than Jimmy Butler. Because you also, let's not forget, you have Andre Iguodala as well, who's going to play probably 20 minutes in this game. They do have a decent amount of wings with, I know Crowder's more playing Crowder more of a 4, but still they do have a lot more reinforcements there than they did before. So for Dragic, I would very much like to see one of Nunn and Hero out as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Do you have anything else for Miami?
No, just keep an eye on the news, and we should get it. It's a 7:30 lock.
Yeah, I think we'll be all right. Like you said, Spoelstra and them have been pretty decent about reporting that. Other teams, not so much. Atlanta Hawks at home hosting the Knicks. Knicks playing their second of a back-to-back. The Hawks are 4.5-point favorites. This is one of only a couple of games with a high total. It's currently at 231, which is, encouraging because everything else is pretty low. You've got 2 games above 230 and then nothing above 220. Really nothing above 218 to be exact. Trae Young coming off a game where had he not been in double overtime, wouldn't have looked nearly as good, but still crossed that 60 fantasy point threshold. Kevin Huerter continues to play monster minutes. He is probable. There's no reason to expect he won't play. Awful fantasy performance in 46 minutes last time out. DeAndre Hunter ended up playing 39 minutes. John Collins played 45.5 minutes. He's probable, expected to play. So if we know one thing, Lloyd Pierce, whether it's overtime or not, is more than willing to run these guys for big minutes. But here's the interesting thing, and I'll throw this over to you. Dewayne Dedmon played 28 minutes, but fouled out with about 4 minutes to go still in the fourth quarter. So I don't see any reason to suggest that in that game specifically, he wasn't going to play. He was going to play more than 30. He was going to play 30 plus minutes had he not fouled out. He was playing really well.
Yeah, I saw the exact same thing, and that's something that I noted here. So, yeah, on the Atlanta side, just starting with Dedmon, I gave him 25 for this one, which he's, like you said, he played 28 minutes in about 3 quarters. He's facing another team today that is just loaded with big men at the 4, at the 5 for a full 48 minutes today. So I gave him 25. It makes him look really good. I might bump it down to 24. He's been playing normally, though, anywhere from 20 to 26, depending on the game. So at 25, he becomes one of the plays at 4,700 that looks like one of the stronger values today. I do like him. And then the starters are playing big minutes. Trey, I gave 36, Collins 34, Kevin Huerter's 36, and that might even be low. I have a lot of interest in Trey at 10,400 in this matchup. Been about a 1.43 fantasy point per minute producer this season. This matchup's going to be great for him. So Trey's the guy I like the most here. Dedmon, if I give him 25, looks good. I'll have some shares of Kevin Huerter. I'll probably have some shares of Cam Reddish. He came back and played bigger minutes. He looked just fine, and he's still in the 4K range. So those are the guys that stand out there. But the New York side, they're on a back-to-back tonight. And, man, I don't know if you saw New York last night, but it was a wild first half for the Knicks. So I got absolutely burnt by Randall and Alfred Payton. But
yeah, Miller benched the whole starting lineup. Yeah,
literally 4 minutes into the game, they get down 18-4. The second unit comes on, led by Frank Ntilikina and Bobby Portis, going a 20-5 run. They play the final 8 minutes. They start the next quarter, and they end up going on an 18-3 run. They were down by 14, the Knicks. And at halftime, or right before halftime, they were up by 15. It was an insane turnaround. What that ended up getting you, though, was the second unit got hot. So Randall and Alfred Payton really didn't play much minutes, and they were both dealing with foul trouble. You had Randall fouling out of this game. You had Alfred Payton leaving in the third quarter because he picked up a third and then a fourth foul. So lots of the stuff looks pretty wonky yesterday. You saw bigger minutes for Bobby Portis again. I think in games where Randall's not in foul trouble and they don't start being down 18-4, you're just going to get Portis playing 20, 22. So I put him down there. This Knicks team, if I just project it as it has normally been, just lower minutes for guys like Randall, around stable minutes for Alfred Payton and RJ Barrett around 30. Those are the main guys who stand out. Randall's probably the guy I like the most in a matchup against Atlanta. I think he matches up the best there. Payton and Barrett are just secondary options. It's just really hard to, especially with Payton's price point coming up to 6,500 now. It's been a little bit lower than that over the last week. It's just really hard to get excited about him because they run an 11-man rotation, and his minutes have been really capped around 30 to 31. You're not getting the 34, 35 like you got for around a month ago. With this 11-man rotation, it makes it really hard to see him just staying on the court unless it's crucial time and crunch time, and a lot of their games aren't going down to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm far from enthusiastic about really anything because of the minutes. And like Mitchell Robinson last game or yesterday played 25 minutes. Taj Gibson played 18. So you don't even have them exclusively splitting the minutes at the 5, which sucks.
Yeah.
So what I mean is, even if Gibson only plays 15, that doesn't mean that you're going to get big minutes for Mitchell Robinson. It's not necessarily the case. You have Bobby Portis that can get minutes there, and that kind of sucks. But like you said, Julius Randle fouled out. There wasn't a single player in the starting lineup that exceeded 30 minutes yesterday, and it goes to show you that these erratic coaching tendencies, when you get down by a few points, or 14 in this one to be exact, can result in guys like Alfred Payton not getting minutes. I liked Alfred Payton yesterday. I thought he was in a good spot, and he ended up being terrible because he didn't get the minutes. He got off to a bad start. Boom, he's out. Granted, I don't think he would have had the greatest game anyway. His per-minute production was underwhelming, to say the least. But, it's kind of tough here. And like you mentioned, the massive rotation here. You're running out way too many players. You've got 6 bench guys in the rotation. The problem is it's not just a couple guys that get minutes in blowouts. There's opportunity for all of these guys to get considerable run, like 30 minutes from Ntilikina yesterday and 27 from Portis. There's just so many moving parts that this team becomes very difficult. But here's the thing, Sal, and I'll throw this back to you. They're facing the Atlanta Hawks today.
Yep.
If they were facing Miami, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So who are the spots that are best to get to and roll the dice? Are we going to say, hey, Payton could get back over 30 minutes today? Julius Randle, obviously at 7,800 to me is a spectacular option, and I will likely have a lot of him. But once you get past some of those guys, RJ Barrett is one of the more volatile producers in his rookie campaign. He's been all over the map. What are we thinking?
Yeah, so my favorite play is going to be Randall. I gave him 32, just a really strong matchup for him. And then I'm going to go right back to Payton tonight. It was just foul trouble and getting down by 15 early in the game just ruined the starters' rotations. Same thing for Randall, really. He lost a couple minutes fouling out later in that game. So I think, again, this can get wonky playing an 11-man rotation, what the Knicks want to do here. But they've had back-to-back nights of just the best matchups. Washington last night, Atlanta tonight. I'm projecting Payton for 30. I'm projecting Barrett for 30. They both make a player pool. I'd rank it Randall, Payton, and then a tier below that would be Barrett.
Okay. If Mitchell Robinson was cheaper, I think I'd be willing to entertain that. But I'm having a tough time paying almost $6K for Robinson.
Yeah, and that's like a thing where he's probably not going to pick up any ownership. Like, he doesn't grade out well for me at all. I gave him 25 minutes. If you wanted to have shares in a GPP, it's a spike player, but it hasn't been getting there all that much lately.
What about Bobby Portis? Did you mention him right there? If you did, my fault.
So Portis is in a really weird situation where, like, last night he gets a ton more minutes because the second unit came in. He was leading that way with Frank Ntilikina playing well, so he gets extended run. And then Randall fouls out, so he gets extended run. And in his previous games where he's played, like, I think over the last week or two, he's had a couple of games playing closer to 30.
He's played 27 plus in 3 of his last 4.
Yeah, and I remember breaking it down with Josh last or Sunday, I think, and we went back and looked, and like all of those games where he was getting those minutes, there was some sort of blowout, some sort of foul trouble. Like, he closed out the final like 14 minutes of one of those games because of a blowout. So like he's on a team that's going to get blown out, that's going to be playing bad. So he has the upside. You saw it last night. But if Randall doesn't get in foul trouble, a matchup against Atlanta, as long as this game's within like 10 going into the fourth, I think Portis' role is more so closer to around 20 minutes. I projected him for 20 today. And at 4,200, he's still not like a terrible play for GPPs, but just not somebody of a priority.
Okay. Yeah, and by the way, Mitchell Robinson was out in the one game that he played, that Portis played 30 minutes. So that's another reason for that. But it's hard to say. If Miller's going to have these crazy rotations and hair-trigger decision-making, Portis could end up on this slate being interesting. And again, one more time, it's Atlanta, right? This is a bad defensive team that plays at an elevated pace and gives them a really solid pace-up matchup. So Portis, I would caution you not to read into the minutes and say he's going to play 30, but I also don't think it's insane that Portis plays 24 or 25 here. If that's the case, then he's going to be great. But I'm not projecting him for 24 or 25. I can't do that.
I agree, yeah.
Anything else for Atlanta? Kevin Hoarder? You pronounce it like he loves to store stuff in his house and not throw anything out.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be a player. Minutes, good matchup. Not a productive player, like below a 0.8 guy for me today, fantasy point per minute. But yeah, so many minutes that'll be out there that, yeah, I'll have shares of him. I would rank Atlanta as Trae Young, Dewayne Dedmon, Kevin Hoarder, and then probably Cam Reddish.
Okay. Let's keep it moving here. OKC in Utah. I don't know if I'd like this game on a 1-game slate. So we still got to get into it, though. The Utah Jazz. All right. So the Jazz have been a strange team lately. Them and the Nuggets. I mean, who knows what's going to happen. Both of them on the schedule, by the way, as well. So the Jazz are 2-point dogs, 217.5 total. We'll start with the OKC Thunder here. There's a lot of mouths to feed on this team. None of them are particularly special, but the big news is was SGA going to play with that hip injury? Now we're expecting him to be available. If he was out, there'd be a lot more to talk about, but that's not the case. I'll let you break down the Thunder here. I don't think there's a ton to get into, but maybe you see something I don't.
Yeah, so Utah, over their last 10 games, they've been a bottom 10 defensive team. Last, 15 games, really. But on the season, they're top 15. So just weird things happening with their defense at this point. And we talked about Gobert in length last week. The same things are happening with Gobert since, a week since then, just not being active when he's on the court all that much. It's this OKC team, though, on the opposite side, they do look a little bit more appealing for me, mainly just Dennis Schroeder and Gallo at their price points. I gave Dennis Schroeder 31 minutes, Gallo 32. They're both fantasy point per minute producers. I have this matchup with Utah being slightly better than average, but not as bad as, like, I've weighted it a little bit more for what they've done the second half of the season compared to the whole year. So they stand out as pretty decent options that I get to. Chris Paul and SGA. SGA has just been really bad over the last month, last 30 to 60 days, but they both make a player pool for me as well. So it's just that this team, if SGA is going to be back, is now healthy. You get a little bit of a price bump for some of the guys since he was out for a game. But I still think that some of the pieces look appealing. Schroeder at 6,200, the price point coming up is a little bit concerning, but he's just been really strong on the season over fantasy point per minute, playing his 30, 32 minutes. So I'd rank this team as Schroeder, Gallo, SGA, and Paul, but I don't expect to have overwhelming amounts of any of them, but I'll have probably like high single digits to around like the 12, 14, 15% mark of each.
Okay. What about Utah? Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley. He's been a very, very popular value option lately, and I guess for good reason, right? He's been low to mid 5K. He hasn't been killing anyone in lineups. He's also hasn't been remarkably impressive either. A couple decent games here and there. Jordan Clarkson playing off the bench. His minutes have been a little bit hard to predict. I'm giving him 25 again today. When he gets hot off the bench, he can give you some impressive performances, but it's really tough once you start seeing his price point come up. He's $4,100 on DraftKings. That's not crazy. $4,300 on FanDuel. And then Rudy Gobert on both of these sites, $7,500 on DraftKings. He continues to see a decline, 82 on FanDuel. And now that Joel Embiid, now that at least I'm assuming he doesn't play based on that, and could be wrong. Although the 11.5 point, I keep coming back to that spread. Like 11.5 points, even against the Pistons, is super weird. But,
yeah, I first projected him as out to start the day, and then I saw the spread and the total come out, and I did another one with him in just because it seemed so odd.
Yeah, it's a lot. I don't know. What are you doing with the Jazz?
Yeah, so the Jazz side of it, I think I like them a little bit more, at least on DraftKings, just because at least our early ownership, nobody's really popular. Mike Conley is like 13% projected. I don't have as much interest in him with the price point coming up, but I gave him 30 minutes. He looks okay. I also gave Clarkson 25. That looks like a pretty solid value option at 4,100 because he can get hot and he could play a couple more minutes even. The guy I like the most is probably Bogdanović here. I gave him 33 minutes. He looks pretty solid. And the fact that he just is somebody he's very similar to Gallo on the opposite side of this one, very consistent, similar minutes, similar position. Just you get no ownership from him. He's coming in low single digits. So Bogdan's probably the guy that I'll have. Bogdanović is the guy I'll have the most of. Gobert, Mitchell, just secondary options. Probably gets more Mitchell than Gobert. But this team's very similar to OKC on the opposite side. A lot of guys look okay, but none of them just look outstanding.
I don't have anything else from this game, Sal.
Yeah, I guess I'll circle back to just Gallo and SGA that I just saw that we did have ownership up. They're coming in pretty highly owned at this point, like both in the top like 5 or 6. At that point, I'd be like, I think Gallo is a very similar player to Bogdanović, and he's a 10th of the ownership. So that's where I'd just go with that. Yeah,
both of them projecting for 29% or higher on DraftKings. That is pretty crazy. I get it. Gallinari is coming in with a discounted price point, $5,900. I think that's, reasonable. Not enamored with it, but Utah Jazz have a bottom 6 defense since the All-Star break. So since the trade deadline. So there is that slow pace though. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, but the Jazz and the Nuggets have been two of the best offensive teams in the league over the last month, basically since the trade deadline. They've also been two of the worst defensive teams since the trade deadline. It's a tough one to work out. I mentioned that because we move on to this Dallas and Denver game. Before we do, though, if you haven't checked out awesemo.com yet, or you haven't and you like our free content, you haven't wanted to dive in yet to check out the premium stuff, when you do, or if you do decide to do that, maybe you get your refund in April and you need somewhere to spend it, and you want to check us out, awesemo.com/join. If you use the promo code NBA Strategy, all one word, it'll get you 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum All Access. So you name it, we've got it. Ownership, player projections, the boom or bust tool. With baseball coming up, the top stacks tool, it's vitally important when you're making and particularly stacking MLB teams. All of the tools developed and used every day by Alex Baker. You might know him as Awesemo or the number one ranked DFS player in the world. All of our premium content as well. You name it, from NBA to MLB articles to MMA to NASCAR to a robust PGA package and so much more. XFL as well. We've got soccer. If they have DFS contests, we have DFS content for it. So go to awesemo.com, check it out. Use that promo code NBA Strategy, one word, get 50% off your first week when you do so. It's awesemo.com/join. And when you do, say what's up in our premium Slack chat. We got people talking DFS all day and night. All right, Sal. So back to Denver. They've been, they beat Milwaukee, and if you looked at the final score, it looked like they beat them soundly, but they didn't. That game, up until 3 or 4 minutes to go, was within reach for a Bucks team that Mike Budenholzer benched every single starter on the second of a back-to-back at Denver. So I'm just not impressed by them lately. I was a little bit surprised, though, to see that they were slight favorites on the road in Denver. So Vegas is still giving them that top team treatment, even though their transition defense, their interior defense, has seemingly fallen apart. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, that game was wild that they were close down the stretch, but ended up pulling it out. Yeah, it's interesting. I ended up giving the biggest piece for me from Denver is just figuring out what to do with the 4 minutes. Like, it was kind of not easy to see, but possible to see that Millsap would just get that 20-minute run in the last game because everybody was out for, or at least seemed so for Milwaukee potentially, and they just weren't going to play big. And it's similar in this spot against Dallas today. So, like, I'm just not even projecting Kristoff. He hasn't played on a back-to-back yet, and at that point, there's issues around Willie Cauley-Stein's health, MKG's health. So it could be risky for a guy like Millsap. At 5,100, I have him in a player pool just because if he gets the 25-plus minutes, he'll look pretty good at that price point, but there's a real scare that he can just go for another 20 to 22. So I have currently the minutes split between Grant and Millsap at 24 apiece. I don't ever actually think that happens in most scenarios. I think just one gets more run. So I'll switch that based on news for Kristaps and Willie Cauley-Stein later in the day. But the guys that I do like getting to here the most are probably Will Barton and Jamal Murray at their price points. It's all sort of just secondary guys at this point. Barton at 6,200, prices up to make it not as appealing. Murray and GPPs at 7,200, same exact thing, but at least he has a ceiling on him. I thought I would have more interest in Jokic. If all those guys end up being out, it'll look a little bit better from a defensive standpoint. His minutes are just the concern of how much they're actually going to let him go. Seems like they're kind of pulling him down in the final month of the season. If you give him 32 minutes, he doesn't look that great. If I give him 34, I start to get to him. So it's just a team that's not that appealing to me at this point. Murray, Barton, Millsap, and then depending on how many minutes you want to give Jokic, will be in a player pool, but all pretty low-end options for me.
Yeah, me too. Although Jokic, like, if Embiid was in, it would have been a whole lot different for Jokic on FanDuel. Now, things change because you've got Jokic at 93. Assuming Embiid doesn't play, you have Gobert at 82, and then the next highest priced player is 5,900.
Yeah, that's just, it's like you're going for the points then at that point.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. Looking at ownership right now on DraftKings, Jokic is coming in at, where is he? 8%. On FanDuel, I have to think he's higher, right? Well, we have Embiid projected in, so that changes a lot. We have Jokic at 15%, but if we project Embiid out, I think Jokic ownership skyrockets.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's a good point that, like, right now, nothing's picking up ownership from Denver. And I agree with it because not a lot looks that appealing, but there's bound to be somebody out of those guys who at least has a solid performance, all at fair price points. So it could be a spot just to get different. And like you said, Jokic could be that spot if the ownership does stay low.
What about Dallas? Lucca, Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, both of them playing well. Doncic has been dealing with some stuff lately. And we saw yesterday he did played 36 minutes, had 38 points. So whether it's the wrist or the thumb or the illness, it doesn't matter. He's playing really well. And now you've got him coming in a home matchup against the Nuggets. I would just caution people to not look at this Nuggets team as, last year's Nuggets or even earlier this year's Nuggets. Defensively, they really have been struggling. So it's hard to kind of condition yourself to think this way, but they've been bad. I mean, they've got a worse defensive rating than the Knicks and the Bulls and the Cavs and the Pistons over the last month. I'm not saying they are, of course they aren't, but they haven't been good. So Doncic is $11,000 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's 11-2. How much Doncic do you envision yourself getting tonight?
Yeah, I imagine I'll end up getting a lot of Lucca. Lucca right now is currently my highest projected player over Trey by about 5 fantasy points. So I think I'll get a good amount of him at $11,000 on DraftKings. I project him for 36 minutes, even on the back-to-back. I'm not projecting Kristaps in because of the back-to-back. Hasn't played one yet. That only helps Lucca even more just from a rebounding standpoint. So it bumps up his point per minute for me over 1.7 tonight to about 1.73. I have him for slightly above 60 fantasy points. So where the ownership's coming in, he's in like a third of people's lineups. I think it's completely fair at this point in the day. The big question mark for me is just what happens with the front court of Dallas tonight because they're all banged up. So if Kristaps is out on the back-to-back, we had Willie Cauley-Stein and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist missing last night, both due to illness. So we'll see what happens there. We usually get this news from them. Kristaps probably by like 1 is going to be ruled out. Hopefully we get news on Willie Cauley-Stein. I currently projected Willie Cauley-Stein in for 22 minutes just because he was dealing with an illness, and maybe now they need him more with no Kristaps. So he's the flat minimum at $3,000. He looks really good at that point. But if he was to miss again and Kidd-Gilchrist was to miss again, you probably get Boban having to just forced into some minutes. You probably get a lot of Maxi Kleber into the mid to upper 30s. So right now this team, the way I'm projecting it is Willie Cauley-Stein in for 22, no Kristaps, no Seth Curry. And I end up liking Lucca a lot, Willie Cauley-Stein a lot, and I gave Maxi Kleber 34 minutes, and he looks really good as well.
Okay. Anything else here? I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, that's all. Like Dorian Finney-Smith, 4,400, should play bigger minutes with some of the guys out, so okay to have. The backcourt, if you end up getting no Seth Curry again, just Tim Hardaway Jr. is playing huge minutes. They're all alongside Lucca, though, so it's not looking as great. But if he's going to keep playing 36-plus minutes, eventually he's going to pop. So I'll have some of him as well.
All right, let's close it out. 1 to go here, Sacramento and New Orleans. The only other game expected to see considerable amount of scoring. Right now you've got the Pelicans as 1-point favorites, 1.5, depending on where you're looking. 235 total. They have a 118.3 implied total. That's the highest on the slate, along with the Atlanta Hawks. Kings is third highest at 116.8. So both teams projected to score plenty here in Sacramento. We'll start with the Kings, Sal. Bogdanovich is right now looking like he's going to get a fair amount of ownership. I guess it makes sense at his price point. I'm not going to dispute it. But from an injury standpoint, you aren't exactly dealing with you aren't exactly getting significant players out that are going to really inject more minutes into the lineup for somebody like Bogdanovich. I guess he's already playing a decent amount, so I'm giving him 30. But you've got him, and then you've got De'Aaron Fox as another one, projected for the second highest ownership on FanDuel today and the fourth highest on DraftKings. So as you can see, Sacramento on a strange slate with a lot of projected low-scoring games. Backcourt is getting quite a bit of attention here.
Yeah, it is, and I think they look like two of the better plays in the slate just from a pure points projection standpoint. So Fox, I gave 33 minutes. I also gave Bogdanovich 30. He played 30 in the last one, 15 in each half. Usually give him 28, but I'll bump it up. The matchup's also going to be good. Like you said, a lot of points here. It should be an okay matchup all around defensively. If you're just looking at backcourt matchups, it's not going to be as great for Fox and Bogdanovich. When you talk about just matchups against Lonzo for every single probably minute that they play, and Jrue Holiday, but in transition, when you factor in the entire defense of New Orleans in the pace of this game, it'll look a little bit better. So Bogdanovich actually grades out as my best play from Sacramento, and then Fox right after that. So I agree with it. When I factor in ownership, though, it'll be a situation where the price point of 5,100 makes it hard to sort of pivot to other things in the area. But if you just build different lineup constructions that are getting you up for an extra $500-$600 to some of those OKC guards that are going to pick up just no ownership tonight, that's a potential pivot spot that I see early on. But just pure points wise, not taking into account ownership, these guys look good. Buddy Hield, I just keep giving him 25 minutes, but at 5,400, I even get a little bit of him. Harrison Barnes, 35 minutes a night. Even if you just project him as like a 0.68, 0.7 guy for tonight, he'll have to look good in this matchup. So he grades out for like 26.5 fantasy points for me. So I'll have some of him as well.
Okay. So just to get a little bit further in depth with the front court, Marvin Bagley has no real timetable to return. Who did you say you were giving 26 minutes to? Or 20? Who did you say was projecting for 26 fantasy points?
That was Harrison Barnes. I gave him 35 minutes. The front court, I split up. I gave Holmes 22, I gave Giles 20, and I gave Alex Len 6.
Yeah, that's the issue here. There's just no continuity. There's no predictability either, even with Holmes back. I think it's possible that with the way Richaun Holmes has played this season, and he's really had a great year when on the court, I think you're going to begin to see him trend back upwards and his minutes get close to 28 or 30, but you can't do that today after he's played 19 minutes in back-to-back games off the bench.
Yeah, like he's been on a 20 minutes limit, and I'm giving him 22, just assuming that with 2 more days of rest, the minutes limit goes up. If we get any news, I'll change that. But yeah, they've been using the 3 centers in the 2 previous games. Len just barely getting in the rotation in those games. But if I just project 3 centers in, they're not going to look appealing. Harry Giles is 3,800. So if you think he continues like as being a fantasy point per minute producer, he's at least appealing if you give him 18 to 20 minutes. But like the upside on that is pretty much capped if they're going to be running out 3 centers. You're like your best outcome is that he like barely hits value for you.
Right. And given how unwilling Luke Walton was to play Giles earlier in the year, I can't imagine that with Holmes back, Giles gets any more than like 18 minutes either. So
I agree. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Pelicans then. Zion Williamson, actually, let me do this. From an ownership perspective, right? Here's what we're looking at. De'Aaron Fox and Bielitsa on DraftKings are the highest owned Kings right now. On FanDuel, you're getting some Bogdanovich. But as far as the Pels go, Zion Williamson is coming in at 28%. Ingram's coming in at 22%. Both of those guys are right now projected for the most ownership on the Pelicans. Then you've got to scroll down to like single digits for Holiday. Well, he's 10%. Lonzo and guys like Derek Favors. I think we'll start here with Zion, and we can start with Brandon Ingram. Both of these guys now seeing very similar price points, whereas before they were Brandon Ingram was considerably cheaper than Zion. What you're seeing now on DraftKings, Sal, Zion is $7,800. Ingram is $8,000. So they're basically the same price now.
Yeah, they made it really difficult with just choosing between all 4. You have Lonzo at 79. You have Drew Holiday at 82. They're all pretty much the same price point. The guys that I do like the most are the ones picking up more ownership in Ingram and Zion, but it's not by that much over Holiday and even really not by that much over Lonzo. Like I have Holiday, Ingram, and Zion all within a point of each other, 1.5, and then I have Lonzo a little bit below that. So I have interest in those 3 top guys for New Orleans tonight. Wherever the ownership is, it's not overwhelming at this point. So Zion would be my favorite. I gave him 32 minutes. I gave Ingram and Holiday 35, and they're right next to him. I have them both projected for more points, but it's like a half a point for a couple $100. So if the ownership goes up on either of these guys, it'll be really easy to pivot away. If not, I'm probably not taking a strong stance on either of them just because they just all grade out so closely for me. And then at that point, I wouldn't feel the need to. But the secondary units and these secondary guys are what's interesting from a value perspective. No ownership on Derek Favors. I put him in for 24 minutes. I think it's a matchup where you could potentially even see more run. No real ownership on Josh Hart or Nicola Melli, and they're not going to blow you away. But if you're looking for value, Nicola Melli's 3,700. I gave him 22 minutes, and he's been producing over the last, really since the All-Star break, producing 20-point-plus fantasy performances just consistently. Josh Hart, I gave 27 minutes in this matchup. He even looks good at 4,200. So this team is one of the more appealing teams on the slate, probably the most appealing game for me I'd probably rank it as Zion, Ingram, Holiday Favors, Hart, Melly, but there's so many of them that I'm going to have all these guys in a player pool.
It is surprising to me that the Kings are only allowing like the 11th fewest rebounds since the trade deadline, because you've seen them run a lot of small lineups, whereas like certainly not as small as say the Rockets, but they've been a little bit better in that respect than I thought they'd be. But if you're getting no ownership on Favors in what's projected to be the highest scoring game of the slate, and you know he can get up to 26 or 27 minutes, not to say it will, I think you're right to project him for 24. Once you start getting above that, it's a little dicey. Actually, 25 seems reasonable. He's played 27, 26, 32, 25, and 22. Yeah, I don't have an issue giving him 25 minutes. He's been well over a fantasy point per minute guy on the season and should have an advantage against this Sacramento front court. So I like that for sure. Anything else for the Pels here?
No, I think that's it. I think there's a lot of them. In that last game, Favors played 22 minutes, and as has been the case in a lot of these games where it stays close, he just didn't close out the last 5. They were also playing a Minnesota team that also was playing small, playing James Johnson at the 5. So that makes sense. You get a matchup today where he'll at least have a better chance with this team running out 3 centers, and no matter what, there's going to be length out there for Sacramento at all times. So he'll have a better chance to maybe not close a game, but get more run in the fourth quarter.
Buddy Hield's been seeing limited minutes, but his shot volume is still pretty high. His usage is still decent. He's still attempting. I mean, this guy has attempted 8 or more three-pointers now in 8 straight games. So he's still getting up a ton of shots. The opportunities there, I wish the minutes were higher. But at $5,400 on DraftKings, as we round this game out, and at 56 on FanDuel, is there any way you can look at Buddy Hield and see value there today with very limited ownership?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it'll depend on the ownership for him. If he stays where he is right now,
6% on FanDuel right now, and
yeah,
on FanDuel he's coming in at, I think he's also pretty low. Actually, no, Buddy Hield's way higher on DraftKings, so very low on FanDuel, 22% on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's the thing. So like I would have interest in him on FanDuel depending on what the rest of your lineup looks like from an ownership perspective. But DraftKings, I have interest in him in GPPs, but when you factor in the ownership, I'm just not going to get there. I gave him 25 minutes. When you factor in the matchup and all that, it looks okay. Nothing great, like not anywhere near like a top 20 play for me today, but it's at least worth having some. But then when you see that the ownership's going to be around a fifth to a quarter of the people's lineups, if that many people are hedging on him just producing efficiently and effectively in 25 minutes, I'll just get away from it.
All right, Sal. Hey, appreciate you guys hanging out, making this part of your morning. Whatever you're doing, driving to work, at work. I definitely know we have a lot of people at work that listen to this stuff, and we appreciate you for it. Don't get fired, but keep listening. Whether you're drinking coffee, doing whatever, appreciate you. It's fun to do this every day. If you enjoy the show, hit us with that thumbs up. Like the video. It's the easiest way to help support us. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. And keep an eye out for our free content today over at awesemo.com. Every day we change things with new content that's free to the public who wants to take a look. PGA leverage scores today with the slate locking tomorrow morning. NHL lineup builder, Awesemo's live premium blog, and the Super Draft NBA projections. Remember, you use the promo code Awesemo, get $20 in free super cash when you sign up using the promo code and depositing $100 or more. $6K up top in the $30,000 give and go today. Superdraft.io or in the App Store. Anything else to say before we head out, Sal?
No, I think that's it. Best of luck, everybody.
Best of luck. And check out the giveaways we got at Awesemo_com on Twitter. Giving away passes all the time. A free Awesemo Plus PGA yearly pass, $250 value. If you guess the winner of the Players' Championship, follow the directions on our Twitter handle. While you're at it, follow Sal Vetri at Sal Vetri DFS. Follow myself at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on the NBA Strategy Show presented by Super Draft.